Shall we make a start? All right,
Let's go.
great. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got Julian joining us here for our wellbeing talk, having a little bit of a conversation around mental health awareness. And Julian will be give a little bit more information about what we're going to do, but just a little awareness on the EIC, provide support for people working in our industry. So if you have any further questions after, feel free to reach out to us, and I'll hand over to Julian.
Right. Thank you ever so much for inviting me along today. Hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, my name's Julian Rathby. I work in the nuclear industry in my day job, but because of a situation that I went through back in 2016, I decided to try and help people. Started off small, started off with just the team I was working with, thought it might help them learning about some of the stuff I'd been through, and then that kind of grew. It wasn't the plan, but other teams overheard it. The site director heard it. They asked me if I give it to the exec team, and then I was around the whole country, traveling around all the nuclear sites, talking to everybody. So it's been a fantastic journey. Obviously, I wish I hadn't gone through what I went through, but I'm now making the most of it and trying to help other people. I will be talking about things like depression and suicide, addiction. At any point, if anybody's uncomfortable with me, what I'm talking about, feel free. You can drop off the call, and we can just check in later with you, make sure that everything's okay. But yeah, this is just my experiences, what I went through. I'm a mental health first aider, but I'm not qualified. I'm not a counsellor or anything like that. So there's no medical advice from me. This is just the stuff that worked for me. But as a quick intro, something that was interesting that's happened recently is as a perfect example of how mental health affects us all so differently. I've been helping two people in particular who are proving the kind of like the ends of the spectrum, if you like. We've got one guy who has had a breakdown after Christmas. He's been suicidal, having massive panic attacks, anxiety, is in huge amounts of debt, doesn't particularly like his job, all the things that a lot of people can suffer with. But I've also been dealing with somebody who phoned me at a weekend, who I thought was going to be wanting to come along to my peer support group that I run, but was actually just desperate to talk to somebody. So I went to a local park where he was. We sat down and talked, and he's the opposite. He loves his job. He's got more money than he knows what to do with, and he's still absolutely desperate. He's got depression. He's having the suicidal thoughts. So all the things that people try and tie in with, certainly with depression and suicide, thinking, well, surely people like that are always sad, or you can only be that way, if you haven't got things going your way. But it proves the point that even with money, even enjoying your job, even one guy's even got this fantastic support network all around him with family and friends, but he still felt like I did, absolutely and completely alone. And what was interesting as well with me doing these talks is, if you'd have asked me to do anything like this or come along to anything like this before October 2016, I simply wouldn't have come along. I didn't think I was suffering with any mental health problems. And if anything did come along, I was 100% confident that I'd be able to deal with absolutely anything. And it was proven completely wrong. I was not prepared in any way, shape or form to what then happened to me. So my story started back in October 2016. We'd been out for the day. We'd been watching some football. We'd been watched a Formula One race, been down the pub, and everything was ticking along, as normal in my life. I hadn't been through any major traumas that I was aware of. I enjoyed my job. There'd been some stressful things going on in the background, but I just thought, that's just what everyone deals with. I'm no different than anybody. So I went to bed that night, and at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up with just this overwhelming, strange sensation. The only way I can describe it is it's very similar to claustrophobia. All I knew is I had to get out of my bed, but when I got out of my bed, that hadn't fixed anything. And I had another feeling that I just had to get out of the room. Wherever I was, it just felt like I had to be somewhere else. So I started pacing around upstairs. That didn't work. Went downstairs. That didn't work. Tried in the garden, up and down the street, and everything was just getting worse. This feeling I was getting stronger and stronger. My heart was beating faster and faster. It was pounding out my chest. And I said, I just had this overwhelming fear that something was happening to me, but I was so scared and so confused. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't want to wake my wife up because she suffers with anxiety herself, and I thought, oh, you know, she'll just panic and she won't be able to help me. I didn't want to scare the kids because they were asleep. So I just sat down and kept quiet for about an hour. I then thought, tell you what, I'm going to quickly check my blood pressure because I'd recently been put on some medication for that. So I thought I'll check it out. Now, your blood pressure should be roughly in the 70s and 120. So 120-ish over 70 would be a very good figure for the doctor. Mine was coming in at 220 over 160. So I was then convinced if it wasn't a heart attack I was about to have, I was going to have an aneurysm or something like that. But I was a first aider as well. And I was also getting all of the symptoms kicking in then of a heart attack. Apart from, I wasn't getting vice-like pain in my chest, but you can have a heart attack with just an ache in your jaw or an ache in your back. And I was getting all the other ones. I'd gone cold and clammy. But more importantly, the overwhelming thing was the impending sense of doom, which is what they teach us in the textbooks. I was convinced 100% I was going to die. There was absolutely no escaping that feeling anymore. So that's when I bit the bullet. I woke my wife up and said, look, you know, what was going on as best I could, because I didn't really know what was happening to me. So she got up, and because she didn't have time to worry about it, she dealt with it brilliantly. Simply sat down with me, made me coffee after coffee, and just sat there stroking my back and sort of saying, you know, what's going on, what's happening, you know, talk to me about it. So I tried explaining it, and that's when we realised I've got to phone, you know, the paramedics. So phone 999. The paramedics turned up. Took them about 3 hours. And as you can imagine, I'm just sitting there getting worse and worse, and I was climbing the walls by the time they got here. So they've turned up, wired me up, put all the leads on, and very quickly said, don't worry about it. And then one of them just laughed at me and went, don't worry, mate, you've just had a panic attack. Now, I thought panic attacks were just feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit kind of on edge. I didn't realize it was debilitating. So I was sat there just really annoyed that they were laughing at me. Anyway, the paramedic said, if you go to your doctor, they can put you on medication for this. It'll stop all the thoughts. And I thought, well, I'm no doctor myself, but I'm pretty sure that you can't just be put on medication that stops thoughts. Medication doesn't work like that. You know, it might work in other ways, but I'm sure it doesn't work like that. So I went off to the doctor very cynically and explained what had happened. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. What they mean is we can put you on a beta blocker. It's part of blood pressure medication that you can take. It's absolutely fine. And what it does is it stops adrenaline working on the heart. So when adrenaline kicks in, so when you've gone into any of these anxiety states, the adrenaline goes through your whole system, speeds the heart up, makes it pump a lot faster and a lot harder. And it's when you often go into that fight or flight mode where you're either going to run away from danger or you're going to stay and try and fight it. So the doctor said that this medication will stop that working on my heart. So whereas that adrenaline normally that's what makes it go fast and pump hard, he said it will stop it doing that. It's a really effective thing. So I don't know about you guys, but if a doctor gives you any kind of medication, you go and pick the box up from the pharmacy, you go home, open it up, and that bit of paper that's inside there, wrapped around all the medication, you pull that out and throw it straight in the bin. Because I always just thought there's no point in reading it because the doctor's told me the medication's good for me. And everything else on there, the warnings, I wouldn't have known what half of it meant anyway. The dosage as well is written on the front of the box telling you how much to take and when. So I just didn't think about reading it. Even if I had have read it, I'd have got to the very back page and realized in the bottom right hand corner there's a thing with all the warnings and the risks, and there was a chance about 1 in a million of psychosis. I didn't know what psychosis was, and those odds were so good anyway, I'd have still just taken the medication. So I started taking it. It's called bisoprolol, and it's a very basic blood pressure medication. I know loads of people on it who are absolutely fine, but the effects then started kicking in with me. I didn't have it happen straight away, because if it had happened straight away, I would have obviously then thought a few days later, hold on, I've just started taking a new medication. Maybe it's that, like I did with the original ones. But this sort of really slowly set in. It was over a matter of weeks and then into months. And at the same time, there was all the problems with my sleep. So tie all that lot together and you'll see the problems that then can start arising. So the psychosis that kicked in, psychosis is where you can hear things and see things that aren't there, or things that might be there aren't acting the way that they should be. And that's the side of things that I had. So anything with a straight edge. So if you look around the room that you're sitting at now, the screen that you're looking at is usually a nice straight rectangle. The ceiling tiles have got lines on them, the desks, the door frames, anything with a dead straight edge would warp and then suddenly stop, warp and stop. Now, the first time that happened, as you can well imagine, I was petrified at what was happening. The first time you're not sure, you kind of double blink and double take things, and you're sort of questioning yourself, really, like, what the hell was that? Might just be tired. But then it happens again and again, and very quickly I was just convinced I'd gone mad. I'd completely gone insane. It was an overwhelming feeling of fear, a crushing fear and loneliness. I said I had fantastic family around me. I got great friends and colleagues, but I just suddenly felt so alone with everything that I was then going through. One of the other effects that the medication gave me also was, I don't know whether you remember the original Jaws film, but there's a very famous scene in that where the policeman's sitting on the beach and they first realise that the shark's out there, and he comes up really close to the camera as the rest of the scene falls away from you. It's a very famous cinematic shot they do. Well, that's how it felt to me when I was talking to people. I'd suddenly randomly have it where it suddenly felt like somebody was suddenly coming up to me right close into my face. And the very first time that happened, I literally jumped backwards, thinking they were about to attack me. Now, the person obviously hadn't moved at all. And so as the effect wore off, because it usually only lasted a few seconds, I was then very self-conscious that I was standing further away from them, that I just suddenly jumped backwards. They're looking at me very confused as to what's going on, what's happening. And I just became hugely self-conscious of the situations that were happening more and more often. And I simply went from being a very confident, outgoing person, the go-to person everyone wanted to chat to, hang around with, have a laugh with, to just almost being a hermit. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to do anything at all. And that fear I talked about just overtook every waking moment. Was the thought of what is going on. I was starting to overanalyze every thought, every experience, every sensation that I was going through. And my biggest fear at the time is that I've gone mad. I'm going to lose my job. If I lose my job, I lose my house. My wife will leave me and my kids will get bullied. And actually, my kids getting bullied was my biggest fear, because I'd been at school with a lad whose dad had mental health issues, and he was mercilessly bullied. And that's all I could see my kids going through. And one of my kids was going through a really bad bullying situation anyway. And so I just had this horrible, horrible fear that he was going to be affected by something I was going through. So like I said, I just didn't tell anybody really what was going on. So the feeling as well, these odd sensations I was going through, it was just snowballing. Nothing was getting better. Every single day, it just got worse and worse and worse. And this just constantly kept building up. So the panic attacks and anxiety themselves, like I said earlier, I thought an anxiety attack was just getting flustered. My wife hates driving. And even if I just say to her, can you take the car off the drive so I can get mine off? She's sort of grabbing the car keys and she's like, oh, is it busy out there? Is it raining? She just really, really hates driving. And that's what I thought a panic attack was. But a panic attack can be absolutely debilitating. And so many people I've spoken to have likened it to that heart attack situation. You're convinced you're dying, no matter what anybody says to you. Certainly, being told to calm down, don't worry, doesn't do anything whatsoever. Everybody does actually experience them slightly different to the start. Mine would almost just literally come out of the blue, whereas some people get like a premonition almost it's coming. They can get a certain sensation, like a warm glow go over them that it's about to happen. So at least gives them a bit of time to maybe prepare for it. But yeah, mine came completely out of the blue. The great thing about a panic attack is that you won't die from it. It feels like it. So like I said, you're not going to tell anybody to actually calm down. So if you come across anybody having a panic attack, and not actually doing these talks around the country, but I've at work come across two people having full-blown panic attacks, and you've simply got to distract them. And the reason for that is the part of the brain that's being activated is a really old part of the brain. It developed first when we were basic human beings. And the bit that developed later on that's much cleverer and realizes that we're not being chased by saber-toothed tigers, that takes a little bit longer to kick in. So the primeval part of the brain is what triggers all the fear, and the clever bit of the brain is what says, there's no problem, don't worry about it. But the clever bit takes about 60 seconds. It's clever, but it's slow. So it takes 60 seconds to override the first thoughts. So you've got to distract somebody. Doesn't really matter how you do it, but I try and do it with spotting things and counting things. So if I was in the room here with somebody, I'd turn around and say, okay, what 3 things in this room can you click? And they'd look around the room and they'd say, oh, the light switch, the power switch, the end of my pen. And you go, yeah, no problem. And again, doesn't matter about the number, doesn't matter about what it is that you're asking them. The point is you're distracting them. Ask them to spot 6 things that are soft to the touch. The harder it is, the better, because all they're doing is not thinking about the panic attack, and they're just concentrating on what you're talking to them to do. It doesn't just suddenly stop the panic attack like that, but very quickly after that 60 seconds has gone by, the person becomes aware that it's not getting worse. It's kind of plateaued. It's still very, all the time you're feeling like it's just getting worse and worse and worse, but then you are aware it's just sort of gone over. It's not getting any worse anymore. It's not getting better, but it's plateaued. And it's this very strange feeling, but it's almost kind of like, it's about to get better. Now, the first time that kicks in, the first, if somebody's, that's their first panic attack, it can last a long time, the panic attack, and it can feel like, and actually take a long time to recover from it. It certainly took me, days and days to get over that initial feeling of what I'd been through. And these days, if I get one, if I don't realise what's coming along, if I haven't put things in place, if I've forgotten to do some of my things that I now do to stop them, then it comes very quickly, but I can also combat it really quickly, literally a matter of seconds, and I've learned to deal with it. Also, if you have a panic attack yourself, obviously it's much harder to distract yourself. So that's where we can then concentrate on breathing techniques. And all you got to do is, it's the most important bit is how long you breathe out for. So I always remember 5, 7, 9. Breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 7, and breathe out for 9. And that then starts to regulate your body. Don't know exactly how it works in the brain, but it works very, very well. So many people I've spoken to have said that's one of their go-to things. If they're having one themselves, they realize if they can get the breathing quickly put in place, it can really quickly regulate things. Most of it's just obvious. When you're having the panic attack, you're breathing so fast, you're taking all the oxygen on board, but you're not actually doing anything with it. So you start to get like pins and needles, you start to get blotchy skin, you start to get all the bits, the dots of color in your vision, and that can make it even worse because you don't know what's going on. So one of the reasons that breathing helps is it just slows that breathing down, regulates it, and you don't get some of those very odd sensations. So what can we do for panic attacks as well in the long term? Those things that I've just mentioned are very good in the moment to stop it, but obviously we've got to try and hopefully get to the root cause of these things. And that's where things like therapy come in. You can have things like CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. That's really, really effective at it. Ordinary hypnotherapy is also a very, very good one to go for. And these things can hopefully indicate where the panic attacks are coming from. I started to realize more and more that mine were being triggered off by the same sensation that I was then having from that original night where I felt claustrophobic. So anywhere that I suddenly went into, like a lift or a room that was very small, I'd start to feel uncomfortable. But at work, it really affected me because I was working at a nuclear power station. We were down in these vaults, which were concrete rooms about 3 meters by 3 meters at the bottom and about 12 meters deep with just one ladder going into them. And yeah, going up and down that ladder in the cold, the visors would completely mist over and you couldn't see anything out of them. And you had to let them kind of clear for about 30 seconds to a minute. And that was literally hell for me. And I didn't want to talk to anybody about it because I was embarrassed. I certainly didn't want to tell all the lads I was working with. But it's only since doing these talks around the country, I've bumped into probably 3/4 of the team I work with, and half of those, so almost probably 8 or 9 lads, have all said they felt exactly the same. Now, if only they'd have felt more comfortable at the start of that journey to say, tell you what, I'm really not enjoying what's going on today on this job that we're on, and talked about it more, because we'd have all realised we were all feeling uncomfortable and we could have worked things around. Some people didn't mind, so maybe they could have done some slightly longer shifts in there and shortened it for the other people. It's a matter about trying to, work around these things, but you can only do that if you're talking about it. And of course, I'd stopped talking about it, and most people are just embarrassed about what they're going through. Another thing I was getting at the same time was these sensations in my chest, which they kept putting down to panic attacks. But that actually turned out to be a genuine heart condition that didn't show up in any of their tests. which was frustrating at the time. That added to my anxiety because the hospital and the doctors were all telling me from the ECGs that I was absolutely fine. But I knew there was a strange sensation. So I actually ended up buying my own ECG from the British Heart Foundation. And yeah, sure enough, I spotted this thing and they diagnosed it and said, yeah, it's a harmless thing, but it must be very unpleasant to go through. And so I get these very strange sensations in my heart, maybe once or twice an hour. But if adrenaline kicks in, I can start getting it every 20 seconds. But once I knew what it was, it helped. But obviously for a long time, it was another thing that I didn't know exactly what was going on, and it just sort of added to the fear. So that was the main thing that had all triggered me off. The anxiety was going absolutely full flow. So was all these odd sensations I was getting and everything else. But the start of the recovery all happened after I'd just been on a holiday. Went on holiday with the wife and kids. We went to a beach. You know, most days it was supposed to be a lovely holiday. And I've seen the photos now, and it did look really nice. But to me at the time, it was like a black and white movie that had no sound. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to drink water. I certainly didn't want to eat anything. Didn't want to touch alcohol, which to me was a massive sign that there was something strange, because I love to drink. So yeah, the whole holiday just felt like that for me. But I was aware of it. I was acutely aware of not wanting to join in, and that the kids were disappointed, and that my wife was disappointed, and that she was worried. But again, I didn't know what I was feeling, so I didn't know what to talk about. So we came back off that holiday, and by pure chance, I spoke to my shift manager at night. I was on night shift at the time, and he said to me, how was your holiday? And I opened up a little bit. I said, I'm really not feeling that good, actually. The holiday was pretty rubbish, and I just didn't enjoy it. And he said, why is that? And so I explained some of the things that were going on, not too much though. And he said, oh, by the way, he said, didn't you mention to me you're on new medication for your blood pressure? Because I had to mention it at work, part of our safety thing. So I said, yeah, I'm on a new one. And he said, you're not on bisoprolol by any chance, are you? My alarm bells instantly started going off. I got the anxiety kicking up. That had spiked straight away. I was like, yeah, why is that? He said, well, my dad's on that and he's feeling suicidal. Are you feeling? And then he listed like 10 different symptoms. And it was, apart from the suicidal things, I wasn't feeling that. But everything else was absolutely what I was going through. So it was like, okay, then I need to get off this medication. So this sounds obvious, but if you need to come off any medication that the doctors put you on, please do it under their guidance and do it in a controlled manner, usually over a long period of time. I didn't. I just came off it overnight. I was so scared that was eventually going to do it to me. So I was like, that's it, get off the medications. And I was very lucky. The very strange sensations that I was mentioned earlier on, they all went away almost overnight. But the damage had kind of been done by then. I'd been through all this weird stuff, was convinced I was mad, and my body had just gone into this constant state of anxiety and stress. And it was affecting every other part of me. It was making me go to the toilet all the time. I was then not able to go to the toilet. Then I was going to the toilet too much. I was feeling sick. I'd throw up at work. And it was one of the biggest things that I've noticed doing these talks is to say to people that in our work, and obviously you guys working with electric, me in nuclear, you can spot people when they're not wearing, say, their high vis, or they're not wearing a hard hat or gloves. These things are drilled into us to spot. But when someone's struggling with their mental health, you may not spot any of the signs, because a lot of us learn to mask what we're going through so well. So please do, look out for people, but it is hard. It really can be hard to spot some of the things. So like I said, I stopped the medications, and at the same time I thought, okay, I've got to try and start sorting myself out now. I knew from listening to what you look at online and talking to people that the NHS take a long time to, try and help you, if they can help you at all. And I thought, well, there must be something I can try and do myself. I'm not massively educated. I didn't go to university. I don't read lots of books. So I thought, I don't know if I can help myself, but I'll have a look. So I said to my wife, let's have a look online, see what we can do for us, for me, and whatever's out there, let me know. So she said, okay, then I'll have a look and I'll order you some stuff in. So this is the first thing that turned up. It was a little journal that she got for me, and as you can imagine, there's me feeling all these strange sensations recently, trying to get over those, anxiety, stress. Clearly what was depression that I now know, but at the time I didn't know what all those strange feelings were, where I was just feeling numb and didn't want to do anything. And when something like that lands on your door, it's just, I laughed. I was like, that's like a children's book. And then you open it up and it literally has colouring in sections. And then it also has little glib things like, as they put sayings in there, like trees that are slow to grow bear the best fruit. And now I'm sure that's true, and it might help somebody at some time. But when you first, get a book like that and you're going through what I was going through, I just dismissed it. I just laughed at it and threw the book down. I was like, yep, that's not for me. But then a few weeks later, I thought, okay, now I've got to maybe give this a little bit more effort and try a bit harder. So I used it just as a journal, just to make notes on things. But to start with, I literally just put things like work was rubbish today, didn't like putting the respirator on again, wife's happy, kids are happy, and we're going out tonight. It was very, very short, didn't put much effort into it at all. But very slowly, I started to add more and more. And over a matter of weeks, a month or so, I was then adding more and more. And I had to change the book, because I actually bought myself an A4 book, and I was filling in probably 2 to 3 pages of A4 a day on everything that was going through my mind. And that's the key. You haven't got to worry about your spelling or your grammar or anything. It's the keys to write it down. And they found out, and I found out, that one of the best times to do it is actually just before bed. It gets all of the thoughts that are going on in your mind out of your head onto paper, and it stops being like an abstract thought in your head. It's a real thing now. It's there on paper, and it helps your brain kind of regulate what's going on a little bit. It also helped me massively, because I could then look back over what was going on. Obviously, I was writing down, I had the date and the day, and I could look back over the weeks, so that if I'd been struggling with things, I could look back and go, why did I struggle so much last week? And you could look back at maybe the week before and go, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, I didn't do so much of that, or a lot of this was going on. And I could start to, see some of the patterns and some of the behaviors that I was doing that might be leading to it. It's certainly not straightforward. It's not black and white, but I started to see some patterns that were in there. Another thing I did at the time was a gratitude list. So every morning, wake up and you write 3 things down that you're grateful for. And like virtually everything that I talk about, that I started trying to learn, I did it massively cynically. I just still didn't believe any of this was going to particularly help me. So I just wake up and write 3 things down, like I'm happy, wife's happy, kids happy, and didn't think much of it. It was just write 3 things down as if some miracle was going to happen. But bit by bit, I started to think about it more. And to give you an example, today I wrote down on my list, top of my list was the fact that a friend of mine has just left this industry, started a totally new job. And it's fantastic seeing the pictures of him online on social media, really enjoying himself now. He's not a contractor anymore. He's working close to home. He's out with the kids and the family. And just a friend of mine doing really well and genuinely looking happy again. Really, really sort of lifted my spirits. And there are a couple of other things that were going on as well. And that sets the day off really well, because when you're going through this kind of thing, the very first thing you think about when your eyes open up is the fear of what's going to be that, going on that day. How am I going to feel? What's going to happen? And it then just spirals from there. So if you can interrupt that thought, so literally open your eyes, go to ablutions, brush your teeth and all that lot. And while you're doing it, you can have a think of these 3 things, quickly note them down, and it really does start the day off a lot better. I also dived into doing some apps as well. So I started using the Headspace app, and that was fantastic at helping out with all the thoughts that were going through my head. Started teaching me about meditation, started teaching about CBT therapies. I also use my employer's assistance program that we've got. So we use Aviva. And again, there's other apps that we've got as well. I just threw myself into everything that was possibly available out there. And it was the first time that I also tried therapy. I mentioned earlier on about the hypnotherapy, the CBT. CBT is really powerful and a really good one for people who may realize that they've been through something in life that they don't want to address at the moment. Let's say it's a childhood trauma. But CBT doesn't worry about that. It simply says, what are you struggling with now? And I can give you some tools to deal with that. It's not worried about why you are like you are. And then hopefully, as you start dealing with things and things improve, you then might feel more comfortable looking into maybe why those things have been dealing, you've been dealing with them maybe badly over the years and you didn't know why. You can then find out maybe why that's happening. And that's one of the things with the medications they give you. Some of the medications can be absolutely fantastic. I'm personally now on sertraline, and it's been a godsend. It's been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But sometimes these medications can actually just numb you. The guy I mentioned first of all today, who I met in the park, he was on one, and he said it just completely numbed all his feelings. And yes, it stopped the thoughts, but it stopped a lot of other things as well. So you're never dealing with necessarily the issue. You're just temporarily pausing it. And then, of course, what happened to him is he'd forgotten to take his medication because the prescription ran out for 2 weeks, and then everything just came back again because, again, he hadn't learned to actually deal with anything. It had just numbed into it. So some of the medication can be fantastic, but like anything, there's always a potential downside to these things. Like I said, I mentioned the Headspace app. One of the great things there for me was doing the meditations. I always describe my thoughts at the time. Certainly now I know I've got ADHD, that my thoughts are like, imagine every thought being written on a small piece of paper and all those bits of paper in a washing machine just tumbling around. There's no way in a million years you're going to try and sort things out in a day. You get so confused and so overwhelmed by whatever's going on. You usually just have what they call task paralysis. You just don't do any of it. So what the meditation allowed me to do is actually, if you imagine all those bits of paper, the washing machine would stop, all the bits of paper would fall down, and everything went calm for just 10 minutes. And I could pick those bits of paper out afterwards, have a look at what I needed to do, what I, have a look at, and I could actually address things and deal with things and start learning to do things again. And yeah, sure enough, the washing machine always, turns back on again and things get confusing again. But that's when you do another bit of Headspace, you do another bit of meditation, do another 10 minutes. And it sounds obvious again, but if it works for you, do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at lunchtime, 10 minutes at night, or an hour at night, literally whatever works for you, just do more and more of it. So after all of this stuff's been going on and the medication and starting to do the therapies and things like that, lockdown came along. And for me, on paper, it should have been absolutely amazing. I was on full pay. We'd been told to be off for about 8 weeks, but I was actually off from the end of March to the middle of September. I was a contractor, so I was on extremely good money at the time. And we just moved house as well from Essex in a town to the countryside in Somerset. So on paper, it shouldn't have been any better. It was just a perfect situation to be in. But to me, it really wasn't. And I know a lot of people obviously struggled during that time. To some people, they loved it. Someone said to me the other day, it was literally the best months of their life. For me and a lot of people, it was some of the worst times. And one of the reasons for me is because I'd always personally been a big drinker. I said earlier on that I like to drink, but I always regulated it. It was still a lot each night, but I regulated the amount and for the period of time I would drink so that in the morning I knew it wasn't affecting me. But without that work the next day, I didn't have any of those things holding me back. So the drinking went out of control. And it didn't do it particularly slowly either. Whereas most people were worried about buying pasta and toilet rolls, according to the media, I was worried about getting alcohol and where I could get it from. I was embarrassed about buying it from my local shop. I didn't want to be going in there every day and be seen and have the eyebrows raised. So I started going to different shops. And then I became really worried that they were going to say that things like alcohol weren't an essential item. So I actually started ordering it direct from a brewery who would drop it off. And when the guy dropped it off the first time, he did shout up the drive to me because obviously with all the distancing we had to do, he couldn't come close. But he shouted up and said, "Don't forget, you're not supposed to be having parties." And I said, "No, that's just for me, my friend." And he was like, oh, okay, then. Well, at least that will last you a long time. And I said, "No, that will last me about a week." And that was the first time I'd felt embarrassed about the amount I could drink. Normally, certainly amongst the lads I work with, it was just that, it was something to boast about. But this guy gave me a really concerned look, and it really made me feel quite self-conscious as to maybe questioning some of my decisions. But that didn't stop anything in that meantime. So every single day I was waking up feeling very strange, going out for a walk with my wife, as we were allowed to do at that time for the 10 minutes, although we were going out for longer than that in the country lanes, coming back feeling fantastic from doing some exercise. And then I celebrated by literally cracking a beer at midday. And we would then drink from midday to midnight. And at the absolute height of the lockdown, I was drinking a litre of brandy, then going on to maybe 8-10 cans of lager, and then gin, wine, vodka, cider, whatever was left lying around, I would then finish off the day with that. Because I'd always been a big drinker, I wasn't going comatose, I wasn't collapsing at the end of the night. But, that was over that 12-hour period I was drinking that down, and that was every single day. I even got to the stage where I was embarrassed about talking to the binman because obviously with all the recycling bins going out there, you can imagine the size of mine. But it's only when he pointed up down the road and said, "Everyone's doing the same, mate." So I looked up my road and realised that almost without exception, all of my neighbours were dealing with it in the same way. It's also when all the strange feelings I'd had before, not quite the hallucinations, but all the dark feelings, the loneliness, all started coming back with a vengeance. And then for the first time ever, I started having suicidal thoughts. This is towards the end of the lockdown. it doesn't happen just overnight when you talk about suicide. This sort of crept in. I was sort of joking with my wife about it a little bit, and then the thoughts just got darker and darker over time. Yeah, I think the first time I even talked to her about it, it really was just if I wasn't here, you know, imagine what you'd do with the life insurance money. And she joked about, you know, spending it, you know, on a Porsche or something. And I was like, hold on, you don't even like driving. So we'd literally joke about it. But she obviously didn't think I was being serious, and I didn't know what I was thinking, really. But then, you know, a few weeks go by, I'm joking about it less. A few more weeks go by, I've gone completely quiet about that subject. I've just kept it internally. And then over another month or so, I was now convinced that taking my own life made complete sense. I didn't want to be going through the sensations I was going through every single day, but the overwhelming feeling was I was a burden to everybody. I was a problem to my wife. I was an embarrassment and a problem to my children. And yes, I knew that they'd be devastated that I wasn't there, but I just thought, well, they'll get over that, because it's even worse being with me now. So like I said, you don't just suddenly become suicidal. It really can creep up on you. And yeah, that's, as I said, that was towards the end of the lockdown. So the depression itself, I mentioned it earlier on. I always had dark days. I used to call them my nothing days, and that was just it. You know, I didn't want to do anything. Some people can get out of bed like I could and actually, you know, function through the day, but a lot of people can't do that at all. You know, they really struggle to even get out of bed and brush their teeth. It can be a horrible, horrible place to be in, that so many people still don't understand depression. They link it, like I mentioned first thing, to money or success, and oh, you've got a nice house, you've got, you know, an attractive partner, as if that makes any difference to depression, and it doesn't. It just makes, you know, people are just judging people again. But these thoughts, if ever you do come across anybody and they are having these thoughts, they're talking to you, they've been brave enough to open up about the thoughts that they're having on suicide, please don't be afraid to talk about it. We used to worry that talking about suicide could actually push somebody into the act itself, and that's now been proven to be 100% the opposite. It actually helps people deal with it better. They can reach out. It certainly, to me, felt like somebody was reaching out from the real world to the strange place I felt that I was in. So yeah, it really is important to talk to people. But if you're talking to people and they're talking about the suicidal thoughts, and they're talking about a plan, they're talking about actually that they are going to do it, don't hesitate, call 999. Let the experts deal with that one. Let them really get involved as quick as possible, because that sort of thing has to be dealt with by the experts. The confidentiality, yeah, a lot of people talk about confidentiality, and they'll say about, you know, oh, I promise you I won't break your confidence, but you know, don't make that promise to them, because at the end of the day, you know, you may have to call 999, and that's the most important thing. So after the lockdown came along, I went back to work, felt, you know, relatively normal, thought I was dealing with things still, and then went to my team leader, and I was just going to say to him, actually, can I get out of doing certain jobs today? Can you just put me on the desk? I'll just sign people in and out. I just wasn't feeling up to things. And we went into the next room. I went into this next room to talk to him about it, and I just simply broke down. The plan was to just ask him one simple question, but I just started crying. And I'm not talking about a tear down the cheek and a bit of a sniff. It was full on, like you see small children crying where they can't catch their breath in between. It was just like that. And I said it went on for about 40 minutes, that. Now, the guy who did this, his name was Nigel, and he was absolutely amazing. No training in it whatsoever. He simply put a box of tissues in front of me, sat down and said, mate, I'm here for you when you're ready to talk. And he actually distracted himself by playing a game on his phone. Now, some people think, why would you do that? But it was the best thing he could have done, because I was so self-conscious as to, I'm sitting here in front of somebody crying, and it's one of my bosses at work, that him sitting there and actually not staring at me with his arms crossed, almost like, you know, tapping his watch, come on. It felt like I could, you know, calm down in my own time. So eventually I managed to get myself together, but then I was kind of like laughing a lot and then crying again and laughing and crying. And then everything just came out. I told him about the suicidal thoughts. I told him about the fact that I thought I was an alcoholic. I told him about all my fears, the fact that I might have been at work drunk at times, and with all my mental health collapsing and all the weird thoughts and the depression. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me that this guy was sitting on the interview panel the following week for the job I was going for. I was a contractor at the time, and I was trying to get a staff job. And then my world just collapsed in front of me again, because I thought, who on earth would ever give me a job after what I've just told them? You know, but as proof is needed that your brain can lie to you very, very well, I actually got that job. And it was because I'd been honest with them, because I'd opened up. They realized that if I'm being honest, they can help me, but also I would be there for my team. I would be able to look after them as a team leader. So yeah, it worked out really well. So that kind of sowed the seed as to what I needed to do. And I don't do this as a lecture. It's the smallest part about my talk, but sobriety for me was a huge, huge improver of my mental health. That and therapy were the biggest improvers. So if you're struggling with your mental health in any way, shape or form, and you like a drink, or you may use drugs to do it, you've got anything. And some people, you could be gambling, you could be shopping. And that's another thing I did a lot of, shopping when I couldn't afford it. Whatever it is that you're using to, make yourself feel better, try and cut it back as much as you can. I said, I chose sobriety, and I've been sober now since January 2021. My wife joined me and my sister. And like I said, overnight, it was the biggest improver. I wasn't feeling anywhere near as weird the next day. My sleep suddenly improved. And it really did make a massive, massive difference. It sounds obvious, but if you're not sure if you've got an issue with drinking, if you're drinking more to feel the same, that's one of the indicators. If you've got problems reducing, or it's affecting your relationships at home or at work, that sounds obvious, but that can be one of the main things. Another thing I talk to people about, if you can find these online, they're called mental health continuum models, and they're just simply a chart with like an arrow at the top, like green one way, red the other. And then underneath it, it's just got a list of behaviors and kind of thoughts. And it's really powerful because what I've learned from doing these talks now is that a lot of people don't seek any help at all because they simply don't believe that they've got any kind of issues. Now, we don't necessarily need a diagnosis, and you don't need the title and yes, you are depressed. Yes, you are suffering with anxiety. Sometimes you can look through these lists and just see the behaviors that are there, and it subtly does it. So we leave them actually around by our water coolers and the microwave and places like where anywhere where anybody sort of hangs around. We put them on the back of toilet cubicle doors. And yeah, you look at them and think, oh, blimey, I thought I was okay, but actually I'm really up in the red. I wonder what I can then do. And then we put a list of, things underneath that people can then go and do to help themselves. So it's a really clever way of people realizing themselves that there's stuff going on without anybody necessarily nagging them or moaning at them about their behaviors. And it's a subtle way and a gentle way of reminding them about looking after themselves. And simply whatever they did to get from red to the amber, just keep going, and it gets you from amber to yellow and from yellow to green. And it's not about living perfectly in the green. Zen-like Buddhist monks struggle to live there all their lives because life comes along. We all will experience the tax man, we'll all experience death. Horrible things can come along as well as amazing things. So life is ups and downs, but it's when you realize when you're having more downs than ups, or you're very irregulated, massive highs, massive lows, it just gives you a chance to maybe look at some of the things that are there. Some things you realize are coming your way quickly. Some things take their time. A divorce, is coming for a while away. Certain things in life are stressful, we know, like moving house. But sometimes things come along altogether, several small things. So I went away on a holiday, supposed to be glamping, supposed to be 5 out of 5 stars. There was blood on the mattress. There was food baked on things. The lady who was running it turned out to be having a breakdown herself. And she then came up to me while we were packing away to leave because it was such a strange place to be. And she told me that because of me talking to her and leaving the site, that she'd taken an overdose and was off to the house to die. So I had to deal with an active suicide situation. That was that week. Then I went back to work feeling guilty because I wanted to recharge my batteries and hadn't done that, but also felt guilty because I knew she'd been going through something even worse than I'd ever been through. So it was a strange feeling. The second week, went back to work and we had our morning brief, loads of people in the room like normal, and the bosses walked in and they're crying. And straight away, my first thought was that we'd lost our jobs. But it turned out one of our supervisors had just taken his life, my friend Robbie. Amazing man, really caring, checked in on everybody at all times. One of those people who didn't just ask you what you're doing at the weekend. He'd remember everything you said and ask you on, on the Monday, oh, how was the weekend? What did you get up to? How was that? How was that party you were going to in the barbecue? He knew everything and seemed genuinely concerned for everybody else, but he was in a world of pain. And even in hindsight now, I don't know there was literally no sign. Even with all the training I've had, I can't see anything that I could have done to change that situation. And there was the example of what I said earlier on about, keeping things confidential. Somebody had promised him, his best friend had promised him he would never break his confidentiality and knew everything he was going through. And unfortunately, obviously, that led to him taking his life. And so this guy now is living still with that guilt that he never phoned 999 and got him the help that he needed. His friend may never have spoken to him again, but he'd still be alive. And I'm sure eventually he would have spoken to him again. So it has massive knock-on effects. And then the third week after that, my son had just finished making a film. He was a cinematographer at uni. And the film was about a teenage boy who was in love, and the girl didn't like him back. And in the final shot of the scene of the film, the young lad, his hand comes into the front of the camera, some tablets roll out of it as it fades to black. And I suddenly looked at my son and said, "Is this a film all about you?" And the room went quiet, and he's looked at me, started crying, and said that he'd felt suicidal for years. So I'd even missed it in my own son. I was so wrapped up, if you like, in what I was going through and what I'd been through, I just hadn't spotted it in him. So it's not always easy to see, but because of what I'd been through, I certainly had, a fast phone number already saved for therapy. So I got into therapy. We started reading all the books, and he's in a much better place now. So these things can all come along like that. So very quickly, as we're approaching the end of the session, things like I mentioned earlier on about the therapies, don't be afraid of them. They're absolutely fantastic. Most people I speak to say they'd love to try them. They worry about Pandora's box, as if everything comes out at once. But when you talk to a therapist, it's not like that. The first few sessions, you wonder why you're paying them. It feels like you're just talking to somebody and just literally just chatting about stuff. But they're very slowly realizing your body language and what you're talking about. And then they open that box up slowly. If they get a traumatic response, they shut that box and talk about something else. It's very, very skillful, very, very clever. And there's many, many different sorts of therapies out there. I mentioned about the CBT and that. There's talking therapies. There's the rapid eye movement therapies. All of them have their place, but whatever it is, if you go to one therapy and don't think it really works for you, try it again, just with a different therapist. It's like anything. If it's not working for you, don't just give up on the whole thing. Just find something else. It's you'll honestly get there and find what's out there. So how can we help others? We can ask if they're okay and simply ask them again. That's proven to really help people open up, because we all walk past somebody and go, yeah, I'm fine. But that second time they ask really makes a difference. Practice active listening. So if somebody comes to you to talk and they're brave enough to open up about anything, just sit there and listen. You haven't got to fix them. Literally listen to them, let them all completely unload everything, and then just help them in whatever direction you can find, whether it's to the, like I said, the employee assistance programs or helplines like Samaritans or local groups, things like that. There's a fantastic website called Hub of Hope, and you put your postcode in there and it tells you everything that's nearby that's for you. So that's a really, really good one to remember. So yeah, signpost them off to get help. Don't judge them. Don't judge anybody. It's a huge thing that I've learned going through what I did. When I was going through it all, I was so paranoid that everyone was judging me at all times. And now, especially when I'm driving, I've calmed down, because I don't know what people are going through. You just assume that somebody, because they didn't thank you, is an idiot, and we get all riled up. But actually, I don't judge them. And at work, if someone's angry, rather than just getting angry back, you think, well, okay, what's wrong with them? And the more you sort of step back from it and watch, look at the teams around you and your family and friends, you start to spot things, and then you can check in on them too. Try and make adjustments at work if you can. Do a risk assessment. If you haven't got your own one, then you can get one off the HSE website. They've got like a template on there. Yes, don't wait for a crisis is another really important one. The sooner you deal with these things, it's so much easier to deal with. As you can imagine, the smaller the hole, the easier it is to get out of. If you wait like I did until you're at the very, very low points in a very, very deep hole, it can take a long time and a lot of effort to get out. Learn as much as you can from absolutely any source, whatever you like doing. If you love your podcasts, find a podcast. If you love your books, get your books. I can highly recommend that one, the Chimp Paradox, Mind Management from Professor Steve Peters. But like I said, podcasts I found really good, because I don't like always being educated. I like subtle things where you just sort of learn without realizing it. Whatever it is, YouTube clips, find something and do more of it. You will learn so much about it. Don't be afraid of therapy is another one. As I mentioned, it really is hugely powerful. Speak to your GP, sounds obvious, but it gets you in the system in case anything there needs doing, like medications to add to it, but it can also get you in the system if you need other things like maybe a diagnosis of ADHD or autism or any of those sort of things that they can help you with. Try the journaling and gratitude list that I mentioned. Watch out for people not acting like themselves. You don't need to be a therapist to spot what's going on around you with your family, friends, or colleagues. You know them, you know what they're like. So if all of a sudden they're acting happier than they normally are when they're normally a bit quieter, that could be a difference. If they're normally a very quiet person and they're suddenly happy, then that's another sign that you can just check in on them. So as soon as you realize they're not being themselves, check in. And if you yourself are not feeling right, when you go to work, you haven't got to do what I'm doing now and tell everybody the depths of every thought that you've ever had. You can simply go into work and say, I've got a lot on my plate at the moment. I apologize in advance if I'm not quite paying attention today, or if I maybe F and Jeff a bit too much. And then hopefully, if you unfortunately don't pay attention, or you do F and Jeff a bit too much, people around you understand and it doesn't snowball. They don't argue back. They don't have a go at you, and they're there to support you and help you. So just simply opening up about having something that you're dealing with can really, really help. Tell people when you're not feeling right, like I mentioned, you haven't got to mention the details. Find anything that makes you happy and do it more. As adults, we tend to suddenly go, do you know what? I haven't been to a concert in 20 years because life came along and kids and marriages and stuff and jobs. So think about it really hard and go, what did I used to really love doing? Or what do I do now that I enjoy? And just do it again, do it more. Those things like that. Another really simple thing to do is your phone. We all look at our phones so much during the day. Is just make sure you change your screensaver on a regular basis to something that makes you smile, something that genuinely gives you deep joy in your life. I've had everything on mine, from my kids, my wife, to a puppy, and to SpongeBob. Anything that makes me laugh and smile, I regularly rotate it. So every time I open my phone, I've got a kind of happy feeling that I can look at something for a moment. And most importantly, and very finally from me, is never stop trying. As humans, we like to put hurdles in front of ourselves, and we convince ourselves that these things probably won't work. So at the first sign of it not going right, we just throw it away, like I did that journal the very first time. But if you can just keep going at it, when you find that one thing that works for you, you realize a light's come on at the end of that tunnel that you've been in for a long time. You've been in the dark for so long that you're really acutely aware that things are improving. And then simply do more of it. That light gets that bit brighter and life starts to improve. Not massively at once. It could be 5% here, 10% there, but keep working at it. If I can do it, absolutely anybody can. So don't stop trying. And thank you ever so much for everybody listening to me. Any questions, feel free to ask them. And yeah, don't hold back anything at all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julian. That was really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing your story as well. There's a few questions in the chat. So one from Jacqueline here. From your perspective, how did your mental health affect your relationships with your family or people close to you, and sort of what kind of helped them understand what you were going through?
So I was very lucky that I had an extremely understanding wife, but it also brought her mental health down. You know, we didn't realize it at the time because everything was just, I was wrapped up in myself, to be honest. But looking back, it really affected her too. But then as I was doing things, she was joining in, because just to sort of see how it went. And we didn't plan it, but as I started doing some of the journaling, she goes, oh, I'll give that a go. When I was doing some of the walking to try and get some exercise and get some fresh air and spend more time in nature, as they reminded me was good to do, she'd obviously come with me walking the dogs. So almost by accident, she ended up helping herself, but not realizing it. The hardest relationship that I had to try and recover from was with my kids, because although I wasn't a horrible drunk, excuse me, I've asked them this. I've said, you know, what was I like as a drunk? And they were like, you know, you were fine. You were funny. You know, there wasn't anything horrible about you. But my youngest son actually summed it up and said, you just weren't my dad. You just weren't you anymore. You were this drunk person. And and now he's neurodiverse, so he struggled with it more. But yeah, I thought that really rang true with me. And the people around me, the relationships at work, I was lucky. I was on a small team on a shift pattern, so I opened up to one of the guys about how I didn't really know what I was going through, but I opened up a little bit, and he opened up a little bit. So without saying too much, we kind of knew we were both struggling with stuff, and our dark humor just took over, and we kind of consoled each other with jokes and winding each other up a lot, and that helped us personally. That helped us a lot. And yeah, then as I found out, certainly the biggest thing that's helped me talking to everybody is doing this, is talking about it. Obviously, like I said, it's not easy to do at times. I understand it's finding that person that you trust. It's not always a colleague. It's not always that person on a poster they tell you to go to at work. It's finding somebody. But once you do start letting it out, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, of course. And sort of on that point, what would you say in terms of sort of like how to have these conversations a little bit more with like friends and family? Obviously, I know it can be really uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, again, going back to that book I mentioned, that the chimp paradox, there's a really good section in there about how to have the conversation. So um, what it's effectively doing is removing emotions from these kind of conversations. When you're dealing with something like mental health and everything that's going on, you're highly charged and very, very emotional. And so when you start talking about things, you start using the extreme words, as they call them, like never and always. It sounds simple when you're having an argument, say, with your partner, and you go, "Oh, you never help me with this, and you're always doing that." And of course, that isn't the case. It's they might be doing something a lot, but it's not always. And so that then winds up the partner, and so the conversation can go out of control before you've even started trying to deal with things, just because of the language you've opened it up with. So what that book taught me to do was to simply explain what, almost like a meeting at work. It's like, right, can we sit down? I've got something I want to talk about. I'm really worried about something at the moment. Can you let me get it all off my chest first? Then we'll have a coffee, and then we'll come back and literally, whilst I'm talking, make notes if you need to. And then you come back and I'll sit quietly. I won't interrupt you. If I do interrupt, or if my partner interrupts, we stop and have another coffee, and we just keep going like that until it's all come out, it's all laid out openly, and we've discussed it. And you'd be amazed how quickly, by removing the emotions and having those breaks so that the tempers don't rise and the emotions don't rise, you actually solve things really quickly. And I've done that with my partner, I've done it with my children, and I've also brought it to work. You know, we've had to have really hard conversations, and it's just doing it again. The key mainly is to have those breaks. Like I said, we all get wound up. You can't help it at times. You know, we're not all Buddhist monks here who've mastered these emotions, but you just become more and more aware of your own emotions and when you might be getting out of control. And then if somebody else gets out of control and get very emotional, you just don't react in the same way. You don't have a go back at them. You just, as I do now. So if I was in a meeting now and someone starts shouting, rather than me raising my voice as well, straight away I'll be thinking, oh, that's not a normal response from somebody. Something else is going on. So I'd say, you know, do you want to have a quick chat outside? And I'll check in on them, make sure that they're okay. It's always going to be awkward, and you can be honest about it. Just say to people, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm just worried about you, you know, and leave it at that. The more it's actually been proven to be one of the best things. Like I said about asking someone if they're okay and then asking again. It's the detail you give them. You're not just asking because you're just passing them in the street and you don't really care. You're actually adding why you're asking. You know, I'm concerned because I've noticed recently you just haven't been really there in the meetings, and you just seem very quiet at the moment. I'm just really concerned about you. And that the person feels sort of noticed, and they might be a little bit worried that they've, you know, this mask that they've kept on has slipped slightly. But if that helps them then open up, then that's fantastic. It's the key to it all.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I think the last question from Jacqueline here is, what would you say to someone who is smiling at work and carrying on as normal, but inside, yeah, they're not okay? So sort of that masking thing.
What would I say to them? If you're aware of it yourself, that's how you're dealing with things. Just like I said earlier, delve into anything that you can that you enjoy doing as the first port of call, because we've all got something that we enjoy. And like I said, just that little improvement, it's about trying to get there. Because again, the step from going, I know I've got a potential issue, I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, to then suddenly going, right, I'm going to go to therapy. That's quite a jump. You usually need a little bit of time in between that to process your thoughts. So yeah, maybe do as much as you can of anything that you enjoy doing, but finding somebody, even if it's say like online, you don't have to talk to a person face to face. Some people struggle with that alone. You can find helplines that you can phone somebody and talk to somebody over a phone. Again, some people struggle having conversations on telephone. So then there's text numbers where you just text or email them in. I've usually found that anybody who starts off there actually ends up talking to somebody face to face, because bit by bit you learn to, you know, what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. But it's just reach out into whatever it is that you think is the least scary thing. I run a peer support group, and someone contacted me yesterday and said they really want to come along. They know it's the thing for them, but they don't think they can walk through the door. So I said, okay, it's a massive thing you're dealing with. So we've broken it down to the journey from their house to the car park, from the car park to the cafe, and then I will meet them outside the cafe. We can then walk around the outside of the cafe. They can look in through the windows. They can see who's in there. And then they can come in. They can just sit there with a coffee and not say a word if they don't want to. There's no pressure. And everybody who's then done that has said they wish they'd have done it sooner. It's just not easy when you're going through. Again, it's easier for me to say it, but honestly, find a group, find a helpline, find something that's a source of help that you just feel the most comfortable going to, and yeah, that help will come along, and the improvements there. Don't expect miracles. You know, we all love the idea of going to a doctor and getting. It's like if you have a rash, you just go, "Can I have some cream?" Put it on, it's gone. With mental health, you've got to work. It's like going to the gym. You've got to put the effort in yourself. But the rewards. I said, if I can not fix myself, but if I can improve myself, then anybody can. Because it's not about being perfect. It's realizing the imperfections in your life and what you struggle with, and knowing when those days are around, and that you can be honest with people.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Julian. I think we'll call it there. I've just sent a couple of links into the chat there. One's just our feedback form. If you have any comments or any thoughts, it'd be great if you could share those with us. And yeah, just thank you so much, Julian, for a wonderful talk. All right. Thank you so much, guys.
Take care. Bye then.
Bye.
Bye.